Welcome to Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. I am really excited about our guest today. Our guest today is Rosemary Card. She's written a book that's coming out, and we'll talk more about that. I'll read the preface or read the introduction to the book that I just printed off of Amazon. When 16-year-old Rosemary Card left Salt Lake to become a model, she had no idea what had waited for her in New York City. As her career took her around the globe over the next 2 years, Rosie experienced the highs and lows of the fashion industry and learned firsthand the strength found in being true to yourself, listening to guidance from the Spirit, and discovering confidence as a single LDS woman. Now retired from modeling, Rosie shares her inspirational true story of focusing on developing her mind and heart in the process of becoming more like Christ blessed her with opportunities and challenge she never could imagine. I'm excited that this book is coming out, Rosie.
Thank you, me too.
And I noticed on Amazon, I checked, it's delivered to my home tomorrow night.
Oh my goodness.
But let's start. Will you a lot of our listeners will obviously know who you are, but will you start and just introduce yourself to our listeners, your roughly your age, your station in life, your relationship with the church, stuff like that?
Absolutely. So I am in my late 20s. I'm about to be 29 in about 2 weeks.
Great age.
I'm very excited about that. And I have a temple dress company called QNOR. And I've been running that company for about 3 years. I like to joke that I have like the most Mormon resume out of anyone on this planet. But yeah, so we've just been doing QNOR. We just opened my first brick and mortar, and I live in Salt Lake with my dog Ted.
That's great.
Yeah.
So here you are in your late 20s, and you've done things that most people in their whole life haven't done, including the modeling career that we'll talk about in the book. But you've opened a store, you've started a business, and you've written a book. Talk about the business. Remind us again the name, roughly where it's located, but why you did this business and what you offer at that business.
Yeah, so the business, it's called QNOR. It means Queen of Light. Nor is the Arabic word for light. And I was a student at the BYU Jerusalem Center when I heard and became familiar with the name Noor, which is kind of like the Jane of the Middle East. And I just thought it was so beautiful. And then I really fell in love with the former Queen of Jordan, Queen Noor. She has an incredible story. She's an American who married the King of Jordan and is really well known for being a huge supporter of women in and outside of the home and trying to champion them in whatever they want to do. And so yeah, I just kind of fell in love with Queen Noor, and my mom taught my sisters and I that the temple was like her queen school where she went to learn how to be a queen. And so the idea of having this company called Queen of Light felt significant to me. So that's where the name came from. And yeah, the store is in Salt Lake in the Mill Creek area. And I started the company because I just felt like there was a need. I had a lot of friends that felt uncomfortable at the temple, and I just thought they might have a million reasons why they might feel uncomfortable at the temple. Their dress it doesn't need to be one. And I remember when I was shopping for a temple dress, I was like trying things on and looking at them and kind of looking at my mom like, what is with these temple dresses? Like, they're uncomfortable, they're not attractive. And she just was like, yeah, it's just kind of the way it is, which was fine. But I'm a really big believer that if you feel comfortable and confident in the way that you look, you can forget about what you look like and focus on what matters more. So my hope is to help, especially young women, even though these dresses are for women of all ages, my hope is to help young women feel comfortable and beautiful enough that then they can just forget about the dress and then focus on everything else that's happening in the temple.
That's just beautiful. And you're right, some of our very best members are uncomfortable in the temple at times, and that's the reality of individual lived experience. But I love what you talked about. It shouldn't be about clothing.
No, it's not at all.
Have you had encouragement from church leaders or discouragement, or have you just kind of gone on this road doing it on your own as you've seen a need.
Well, when I first had the idea to start QNOR, I went and met with the temple matron at the time, Sister Samuelson, and she was very encouraging. Because I didn't even know if that was allowed. I
Yeah.
didn't know if you had to be like sanctioned by the church or something. And she really, like, bless her heart, gave me the go ahead and said, "Go for it. You can do this." And over the last few years, I've come in contact with some leadership of the church and always received very encouraging remarks and really kind words, both for the temple dress aspect and also kind of the community aspect behind QNOR.
Tell us any experiences of women that have then come to your store, bought a dress, and even gone to the temple, or talked about how this has really helped them to have a beautiful dress to help them feel beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, there have been a lot of stories. I think the ones that really stick out in my mind are, well, there's two different types of stories. One is when a woman says, "I haven't been to the temple in years," whether because of a divorce or a death in the family or whatever reason. And she says, "But I bought this dress almost as like a goal dress that I was going to have it hanging in my closet. I'm going to look at it, and it's going to encourage me to remember that that's what I'm working towards." And it's always so incredible when you hear people say, "I put this dress on and I looked in the mirror, and for the first time I felt like I could see myself through God's eyes." A lot of women who struggle with body issues and self-loathing have said, like, for the first time I felt beautiful in this dress. Another kind of story that I hear every now and then that I really am humbled by is when people buy these dresses for burial dresses for
Wow.
family members. There have been a few stories where someone has bought this dress for a family member as this family member is working towards rebaptism or just going through the temple for the first time in their later years. And a few times those individuals have passed away before they've reached that goal, and so their family member was able to use it as a burial dress. And that is just something I could have never seen coming, but a really sweet and humbling way to be able to participate in those sacred moments for families around the world. So
That is beautiful, Rosie. I've
really,
never thought of both of those. Those are beautiful examples.
yeah, it's something I never thought of when I started QNOR, but it's been a really special thing to be able to be a part of.
Did you go to the temple and receive your endowment, connect them with a mission, or did you do that just on your own, not event related?
Yeah, I did. I went because I was going on a mission back
And
when
which
you had to go
temple
at
did you go
21.
to?
I went to the Salt Lake Temple.
Salt Lake Temple was your first
Yeah.
temple.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's people that are close to my life, women that at times have had a difficult experience feeling beautiful in the temple. And I don't think it's about being vain.
No.
I don't think it's about having to be better than looking than other people. I think everybody just wants to feel beautiful and good and feel good, just like you've communicated.
Right. And I think I've had a few people that have said, like, "What are you doing? This isn't about a fashion. The temple's not a fashion
Yeah.
show," stuff like that. And I've thought, oh, I completely agree with you. And I think it's important to realize that the church spends a lot of money on the temples. The temples are very beautiful. And they have very fine linens and, beautiful marble and granite and that kind of stuff. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to present your very best. It used to kind of feel silly that I felt like I would wear something nicer on like a random date than I would when I was going to the
Interesting.
temple. And if we really believe that like temple is the most sacred work can be a part of, for me at least, I want to be dressed my very best.
Yeah.
And then again, just so that I can kind of like forget about it, what I'm wearing, and focus on the things that matter most.
I love that. Thank you. I hope everybody will check out your store. I assume you have a website. Tell us the website address.
Yeah, it's just QNOR.com, QNOOR.com.
My wife and I have a daughter at the Jerusalem Center right now, and
Such a great place.
I think she connects with some of the very same issues you do when it comes to the beauty and other faiths and other cultures that are so prevalent at the Jerusalem Center. So what a wonderful experience to be there.
Yeah, that Jerusalem Center is a great gift that some get to participate in.
So you're like a snowplow person, Rosie, because you're doing things that no one else is doing. I call you a snowplow. I'm the son of a snowplow father that did things that no one else did, and it created vision for me. But you're doing things that people aren't doing, that no Maya Maid or Laura lesson ever kind of said you could do this or this. So I love these kind of stories where you have enough feeling about your ability to accomplish things, but you're also in a road that no one's ever walked before. No one's ever done this, and some might say you should have more experience or be older or male
Mm-hmm.
to do some of these things like write a book or open a store. So I love what you're doing and the vision it creates for everybody, men and women, that we can do hard things and we can be creative and chart new courses and help build the kingdom. Talk to us about this book that also, for our listeners, as I've read through the manuscript, it's this wonderful book about Rosie's life, and there's a number of chapters that, but it also, within all these chapters, there's a great deal of teaching
Mm-hmm.
and a great deal of life experience. So it's not just a story of Rosie, but you use your story to then help us understand, to do better, to minister in a more effective way. But talk to us about why you decided to write a book, and then we'll kind of go through some of the chapters.
So something that I experienced early on when I started QNOR is I felt like, especially because QNOR was building a strong presence on social media, I felt an enormous pressure to kind of squeeze into a certain mold. I had just left working for the church. I was a returned missionary. I taught at the MTC. I was a graduate of BYU. I had worked on the Mormon.org campaign.
Wow.
And now I had this temple dress company. And I just felt tons of pressure to be a very specific way. And it was difficult because there were things that I wanted to talk about. There were ideas or questions that I wanted to bring to the table, but I felt terrified of what the backlash would be. And of course, you hear often that, like, don't get political or don't get controversial with your company. Just
Mm-hmm.
keep that separate. And I tried for a while to maintain that, and then I just thought, I don't think I have this audience so that I can sell temple dresses. I think Heavenly Father is giving me and Heavenly Mother an audience so that I can share the things that they've taught me,
Mm-hmm.
and the things that are important to my heart. And so um, it's been a really interesting journey to kind of both say I am very clearly very Mormon, but I also have these questions or concerns. So I've lived kind of like both a stereotypical Mormon
Mm-hmm.
life, but then I've also had some very unique experiences. And my hope in sharing that is not to be like, look at me, I'm different, but just to say, hey, I am different and I'm still here. And if there's space for me, there's space for you. And if it's okay for me to talk about things, it totally means it's okay for you to talk about things that you want to talk about. And so the book is really just, it's a great venue to start having conversations that I wish were more common. I've reached the point where I'm kind of done waiting and kind of saying, like, oh, I wish this topic or this conversation would come from the top down. I've just realized we're going to go bottom up and we're just going to start talking about these things.
That's beautiful. Are there specific things, as an example, before we actually get into the chapters, that are examples of conversations you've always wanted to have that now we're having because of the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few common themes. One is just the way that we see women and the way that we teach them and raise them. I think our culture has developed a few stereotypes or molds or kind of traditions that we see women through, or kind of the female Mormon experience is shaped by, that I don't think are doctrinal, and I don't think they really make sense, both with the gospel of Jesus Christ and with our time. Another would be our LGBTQ brothers and sisters and how they are treated, and what their experience is like within this church and the gospel. And then the next would just be when people have doubts or questions. Um, Often we say like when they have a trial of faith, but I think it's just like when people are experiencing faith. And yeah, so I think those are kind of three things that are really important to me that I hope that we can speak more about.
I love all three of those, Rosie, and I think our listeners are kind of a couple groups of people. I think our listeners are younger people that are needing examples like you and needing conversations about these topics because they want to find a way to talk about these things and also find a way to stay.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of people that are leaders, local leaders, Relief Society presidents, young men's presidents, elders quorum presidents, that also want to know how to talk to our members that are working on all three of those things you talked about. So I think it's a great podcast for our listeners that are trying to understand better how to minister.
Yeah.
Minister to people who are having good and honest questions that want to turn towards our church to talk about these things versus we can turn to other sources that may not be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about chapter 1 is called Middle School and High School Are Brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to give us some thoughts on that chapter? I'm sure that resonates with anybody,
Yeah.
all of our listeners.
I feel like it's like one of the most universal truths. You know, every now and then you hear someone that middle school and high school were just like the best days of their lives. And I trust them that that's an authentic experience, and I have a really hard time understanding it. But this chapter just kind of introduces my story and introduces, I dealt with a lot of bullying and teasing at that time in my life, and in turn, a lot of self-doubt, self-loathing, depression. I think, unfortunately, things that are very common amongst teens. I'm lucky that I often with, the suicide rate, I feel like I'm lucky I survived it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all are to some extent. And yeah, so that's kind of the introduction of the book.
How tough was your emotional health? Were you thinking of suicide during those years?
Yeah, there were absolutely times. In the book, I read about a time where I remember every night just like silently sobbing. I shared a bedroom with my 4 sisters. We were all in one room. So kind of quietly sobbing and just praying that I wouldn't wake up the next day.
Oh, that's really honest.
Yeah, I wanted to just be done. And I look back at that time and it just breaks my heart. Mostly because I know that's not a very unique experience. I think that there's a lot of kids that feel that way.
What does your older self now want to say to your younger self if you could go back into that bedroom? And by doing that, I think you're talking to lots of women and men that are feeling what you felt in those years. What would you say?
Oh, I would first want to validate it. I would want to say, like, yes, what you are experiencing is very hard and you are very lonely, and like all of these feelings are fair. I would want to squeeze that little version of me and just love her and let her know that she's not alone. And I know it sounds cliche, but it gets better. I had a friend who recently shared kind of like a thought that was really important to her, and she just talks about how there are times in your life that are very joyous, there are times that are for preparation, and then there's times that are really, really hard. And that was one of those times that was very, very hard, but it didn't and it doesn't last forever, and that it does get easier.
I like that. Thank you very much. In this chapter 1, Rosie, you go on to talk about people that leave the church.
Mm-hmm.
And it's some very wonderful ministering language here that I think is really helpful because we have different needs to minister, but I think to ourselves we have a need to minister to those that, for whatever reason, are stepping away and still honor that path, even if it's outside of the circle of our beliefs, and they're still part of the human family. So what can we do to, carry their cross and help, comfort them? And I've never had any training on that. I'm 57, I've never sort of been in a situation where we're training on that. But go talk a little bit about what you teach here because it's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is just thinking a little bit more about how the plan of salvation and that the atonement is really for all of God's children. And I know we hear that all this time, but do we really think that our heavenly parents are working through the day and through the night to help Miley Cyrus get home? You know what I mean?
Uh
Like
huh.
just as much as they're working to help me get home, and that their plan of how they're going to save their children is very much for all children, and especially those that aren't a part of the church. And so I think we often, I think I've felt in my life that sometimes we see people who step away from the church as lost and that their progression is stopped or that they've distanced themselves from God. And I just think, baloney. He and our Heavenly Mother allowed their son to be crucified so that that child who is stepping away from the church can return to them. They're not going to let a simple mistake, it just doesn't make sense. So they would be like, oh, shoot, well, we sacrificed a child for you, but since you've decided to leave for a time, game over. I just think, no way. That they're always willing to change and adjust, and that our job, like we are told, is to love God and to love others and to simply love those people and try to make it as easy as possible for them to come back.
I love that, and I encourage people to read the book because there's some wonderful writing here about people sometimes very wounded, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very difficult to leave the church alone when you've given so much to the church, and then for whatever reason you step away. That we need to thank them and we need to honor them and help, like you talk about here, minister to any wounds they may feel, even if they're moving outside the circle of our beliefs.
Well, I just think it's like a kid. Like if a teenager is lashing out because they're hurt and they maybe don't process their hurt properly, and they can say things, like a kid says to a parent, like, I hate you. They don't really hate the parent, obviously. They're struggling to process their hurt that they feel. And so, not to say that people that leave the church are like kids, not at all. I just think that sometimes active members, we rightly so, can feel pretty defensive of the church. And it's important to remember that the church is going to be okay. If
Yeah.
someone posts a few negative things on Facebook about it, it's going to be okay. Um, it's been dealing with people saying negative things about it for quite a while now. And so I think they figured it out. But someone that does need love and someone that does need protection is that person. And I don't think that we are called to be defenders of the church's reputation. I think we're called to be our brother and sisters' keepers.
Well said, and I like some of the lines in this chapter. Christ loves us even when we're not easy to love. Thank heaven.
Mm-hmm.
We simply need to love these people rather than judge them. Anything else you want to share with our listeners about chapter 1?
No, I think that's great.
Chapter 2 is titled A Model Mormon. Share with us some of the information in this chapter, Rosie.
So, chapter 2 just goes into how the high fashion industry at 16 and some of the experiences that I had within that industry.
Wow. So, how did this all come about? Tell us a little bit about it. You're just going along in your life, and suddenly you're kind of in the high fashion industry, an industry I don't know much about, but as I've read your book, it's a wonderful, beautiful, challenging world.
It is. I often like to say there are a lot of incredible people within the fashion industry, and I was very, very blessed by some really great people. Probably first and foremost was my agent and his boyfriend, who, at a time when my career wasn't going super well, and I couldn't afford the $2,000 a month rent at the model apartment, they invited me to move in with them, and I slept on their couch. Even before they had moved into this brand new apartment, I was sleeping on a couch in this apartment, and I lived with them for about 3 or 4 months. And Um, they were very, very good to me. And I wasn't, I was 16, and at that point, there wasn't a lot of talk about gays and the church and how those worlds mixed and how they could mix. And so I felt pretty clueless. And they were just very kind and very patient and very understanding, especially at a time where the church's reputation, as far as their opinions towards the LGBT community, was getting pretty tense.
So you're in the middle of that space.
Yeah, and it would have been very easy for them to say like, no way. But they helped me, and they were good to me, and their kindness had played a huge role in my life.
So this is a couple in a same-sex partnership you're staying with. How long did you stay there, Rosie?
About 4 months.
4 months, and you're 16.
Mm-hmm.
How did your parents feel about you going on this road?
The modeling road in general, my parents were very nervous about. They never raised us to make money off of our bodies. And that was kind of like their worst nightmare. But they prayed and fasted a lot about it when the opportunity came up. And they felt like, though it wasn't in their plan for their daughter, for her to be a model, they did think it was part of God's plan for his daughter.
Wow.
And they didn't really feel like it was their place to say no to that. And so they obviously were very nervous about it. But like they've done countless times in their lives, they took a step forward, even though it seemed hard and scary. And they, of course, they did their due diligence to really know my agency and my agents and who I would be working with. And they felt like they could trust these individuals. And when I moved in with my agent and his boyfriend, now husband, that was never an issue. They really didn't put more than 2 seconds of thought into that. And I remember, though, that my mom said, like, if anyone from the ward asks, maybe we should be careful. Because she did receive a fair amount of flack from ward members that she even let me go in the first place. And I think understandably so. They were just nervous about what kind of comments they would receive if someone knew that I was living with a gay couple at that time.
It's really interesting because my wife and our parents have 6 children. We navigate this road that your parents are navigating. And I love the way you kind of, it wasn't necessarily their plan for you, but it was your plan for you, and they honored that. Mm-hmm. I like the principle of self-determination, that Rosie, at the end of the day, works with God to find Rosie's plan. Yeah. And as a parent, it's hard for me. I think I teach our kids principles, but as they age up, my wife and I have learned to honor their individual decisions and the things that they feel are right for them, even if it's sort of outside of what we first thought would be their path. And so I think that's a well-done job on the part of you and your parents to walk, that road.
Yeah, I imagine it's tricky. And of course they feel responsibility as when I'm young and still a child to kind of guide my steps. But ultimately I'm the one that has to live with the consequences. So
now, you created really good boundaries. I'm reading in your book, the no nude, no semi-nude, no sheer clothing, no cigarettes, no alcohol. Mm-hmm. How did you decide boundaries? Did you work with your parents to do that, or your agent, or it seems like you were mature enough and knew this industry well enough that you knew that I needed to have boundaries?
Yeah, so my mom and I went into it with that understanding, and then we communicated that very early on to the agency because we wanted them to be completely aware of what they were getting. I was not just like any other model they were signing. I was a little bit more complicated because I had these boundaries. And ultimately, those boundaries did limit my career and played a big role in the end of my career. But I look back and though I would feel still totally confident speaking to young women's groups and relief societies and people and podcasts about my modeling experience as an LDS woman, had I not stuck to those boundaries, because I believe in the atonement. And I believe that even if someone steps outside of the boundaries that we are taught early on, that they still can be great examples. I'm grateful that my parents really, in some ways, scared me of stepping out. I think I was pretty scared of stepping outside of those boundaries. And I'm grateful for that. I'm glad that there's nothing that I am scared someone's going to stumble upon the internet.
Yeah. So one of the things I love about what you said, Rosie, is that you talked about the importance of creating boundaries, and I think that's a great lesson for everybody. But you also recognize in a pragmatic way that all of us, and coming out of my YSA experience, realize we have slip-ups. So we've got to sort of kind of pragmatically acknowledge that we're not meant to be perfect and we're supposed to learn from our slip-ups, and that's maybe the greatest test of life is what we do after we mess up or slip up, and can we move forward and learn from that experience?
Yeah, and I think there's really cool precedent for that in the Book of Mormon. That this isn't like a new development that we're trying to push. It's actually in our kind of our foundation, that the story of Alma the Younger. Like, kind of a shady dude in his younger days. And I'm so, so grateful. And I think it's important to recognize that that past of his didn't get cleaned out of those pages. That
Yeah.
that story was included. And it wasn't kind of polished up to make it look nice. He made some really poor choices. But he turned into, obviously, an incredible disciple of Christ. And I dare say that his rough days helped him become a stronger missionary. And so I think that we can follow suit, and that we don't need to try to polish up those dark days that in our lives, or maybe just the days that aren't so picture perfect Mormon, but they can be a great benefit to us.
I love that. There's no shame in what you're teaching our
No.
listeners, Rosie. There's just hope.
Yeah.
And there's even hope that the mess ups in some way refine us to be the kind of people God wants us to be.
Absolutely.
And the atonement makes us clean, but it doesn't wipe the learning or the experience or the Christ-like attributes that come into our life. And I love that. It's just beautiful. And I hope our listeners can follow that line of thinking, because it's very consistent with our doctrine.
Yeah, I think in the book, kind of moving through the book, I talk about that there are things that happened to me in my modeling experience that initially I thought like, oh, I'm going to have to hide this. And I'm grateful, with the help of a lot of good people in my life and a good amount of therapy and the gospel, that I've reached a point where I can say, oh, I don't need to hide this.
That's beautiful.
That some hard things happened. And I made some choices simply because I was a kid and just doing my best, and my best wasn't always the best that I would want to offer now. And that's okay. But those experiences now have really, really blessed me and really helped me.
That's beautiful. Modesty is something that I've really been trying to understand.
Modesty.
And some of your book talks about this. Do you want to just talk about that? One of the lines here, you say, if boys grow up with the constant messaging that they aren't in control of their thoughts or accountability for actions, what kind of men will we make them? Mm-hmm. Talk about that and the backstory behind kind of modesty and how a better way to teach that.
Well, so I definitely, I can't think of the word, or I identify as a feminist, and I feel like that's a strong part of me. And sometimes people think, oh, you're anti-male. And I think, oh, absolutely not. I feel like I'm actually a really big defender of men. And when I hear things at church that diminish men, it's pretty offensive to me. Like, I don't like the jokes that are like, oh, you know, we wouldn't be able to do anything without the Relief Society fixing everything for us. Or when we joke about men being like the oldest child in a family and that the wife has to take care of it. And I don't like when we comment about young men or boys that they need to be protected because they can't control their thoughts, and, you know, the boys will be boys mentality. I just think absolutely not. These are sons of God. And if we know anything about our Father in heaven, it's that he is accountable for his own actions. and that he is a strong leader and that he is very nurturing. And so I don't like when we speak down to men in that way, because I think it is not representative of who they really are as sons of God. And I think as far as modesty, I think modesty is very important. But I think we have focused way too much on one tiny portion of modesty. We are so focused on the clothing and body aspect of modesty that we barely give any play to modesty and like word and deed and thought and how we treat others and how we see ourselves in relations to others. I like to think that like judging someone because they're wearing a tank top is probably like the most immodest thing you can do because you're assuming that you know better than this person and that you are in a place where you can judge this person, which we all know the only person capable of judging is our Savior. And so to assume that you understand this person on the level that you could understand why they're dressing the way they're dressing, I think is very immodest.
I really like that. It's very consistent with where I've kind of evolved to, and in a healthy way to teach this to young men and young women and leaders, better understanding how to do this. That's just beautiful, Rosie. I don't have anything to add to that, but I very much agree.
Thank you.
And so it's a much broader way to think of modesty, and somehow this bare shoulder has become the pinnacle of how we measure modesty, by shoulder. Any closing thoughts on that way we see bare shoulders and that becomes modesty or not modesty?
I mean, I guess if we are looking for a way to categorize people, if we're looking for a way to say whether someone is a good Mormon or not, that's a really easy way to do it. But if we're just looking to satisfy that need to kind of put people in a certain box, then we're missing the point of what we've been called to do. We haven't been called to define or put people in boxes. We've just been called to love them. And yeah, I think if you love someone, you're not so focused about on their shoulders.
In this chapter, you also share a letter from your dad.
Yeah.
I just love this letter. The night before my first trip to New York, my dad had given me a red journal. Inside the front of the cover, he pasted a painting of the Savior. On the opposite page, he pasted this note: "Way to go, America's top model, Rosie." I just loved that. There was no sort of list of cautions. It was just, I am so excited for you. And I just loved reading this. You can do this. You are a dedicated hard worker. You love adventure and are very mature. You make friends quickly and are a wonderful friend to others. You will be stretched by this amazing opportunity. But I'm reading this through my eyes as a dad, and I'm thinking this is a wonderful letter to you as you're embarking in an unusual path. Any thoughts about that letter you'd like to share with our listeners?
I think this letter is important because it is a great example of, obviously my dad would have things that he would hope to caution me of, and we had those conversations, but if he really wants to help me make wise choices, I think the most important thing he can do is let me know that I'm loved and that there's value within me, and that he trusts me, and then that enables me to become an agent and act for myself, and it helps me be more accountable because I feel greater self-worth. If he's just going to tell me the do's and don'ts once I'm out of his home, then sure, that's great, but that doesn't really motivate me to become better. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does, and I think there's great parenting wisdom in there. And it's interesting how your dad needs roughly, I assume, I'm 57. How old's your dad?
I think he's about the same age.
Yeah, so I'm thinking I'm your dad's
60,
age and you could be my daughter.
Yeah.
But I love the way look how he handles sort of the caution here. Instead of a list here he goes, and more important, he makes us all positive instead of just kind of reminding you of all the things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
And more importantly, I'm adding, Rosie, hold on to your secret weapon, the Holy Ghost. You can say no anytime, anywhere. People respect your unusual morals and standards. As you stick up for yourself, you'll be surprised how many stick up for you. I am so excited for you. You go, Rosie, love Dad with a smiley face. And
Mm-hmm.
I just thought there is some incredible, and I'm getting tenderhearted, there is some incredible parenting wisdom in that,
Mm-hmm.
where he lifts you at the same time in a way that you can do this and you can walk this road and hold yourself in a great way without being negative at all. So I
Mm-hmm.
just thought that was so beautiful.
Yeah, he definitely was, and has always been very, both my parents, empowering me to make the right choice. And it kind of sets like an expectation of like, of course you'll make the right choice, but if not, I've always understood that their love is unconditional.
That's a great thing. Anything else, Rosie, you want to share about chapter 2?
No, that's all right.
So here's chapter 3. This is an interesting title. A has been at age 18.
Yes.
So that not many people can write that.
Right.
Tell us what that means and what happened.
Well, I mean, it's been a very interesting thing that really, especially in the few years right after I stopped modeling, people who knew me during that time always felt pretty discouraged when I told them I had stopped. I think as a lot of them saw that as like an ultimate thing or a dream of theirs. And in their mind, I was just kind of giving it up and walking away. And that was discouraging to them. And I would always joke, like, I wonder if I'm going to do anything in my life that
You
people
peaked
will,
it.
yeah, I peaked early, that people will be as interested in. But as frustrating as that was at a time, now it's been a great motivator to me that like I've got to do stuff that people think is cooler than my modeling days. And I really had to kind of redefine myself and discover who I really was, because I had lost or given up or walked away from something that I thought really defined me and what I thought made me special. And once I lost that, I had to find a new thing that made me special.
Let's go on to chapter 4. I love this title. Likes do not equal love.
Mm-hmm.
Help our listeners understand more about that.
So I thought that I would find ultimate happiness through modeling because it seemed kind of like being prom queen on crack. And so I thought, surely this is going to make me happy because not only will I be well known at my high school, I'll be well known in the world. And not that I was ever a world famous model, but I realized fairly quickly that that doesn't bring happiness. And I think it applies to basically all people today who are on social media, because there are people with greater followings on their Instagram account than Vogue has subscriptions. And so you don't need to be a model in Vogue to be seen. You just need an Instagram handle. And there is this huge desire to be seen and to receive likes and comments and to become, Insta famous or Twitter famous, whatever it may be. But this unfortunate truth is that it just doesn't bring true happiness or true love.
And what would you say if you were at girls' camp or boys' camp to try to help young people not to go down this road too much? What would you tell them to replace that with, or how to manage that?
I would say dream up anything that you want to learn how to do or anything that you would hope to be good at one day and start working on it. This goes for myself, like if I spent a fraction of the time, I'm in a tricky position because my company is based off of social media, but
Yes.
if we just took like a fraction of the time that we spend every day on social media and devoted that to learning a new skill, we would be getting pretty good at stuff pretty quick. And so I really think social media and the same, it just goes with, I think Satan will try to distract us by getting us to focus on simply our appearances or just things that matter less. And when we do that, it just wastes our time. And our purpose on this earth is to learn new stuff. And so when we do that, it feels good. And I think especially as women, we are creators. by nature. And so when we focus our time learning and creating new things, there is something that just feels right to our spirits because it's our purpose. And so, yeah, I really encourage people to just learn something, use their brain.
I love that. I want to circle back to the word feminist because that's a word that at times in our church has been labeled with people that are perhaps outside the circle of our doctrine,
Right.
and something we didn't want to be. And I certainly, in my YSA assignment, connected with women that were taking on that label. In fact, today I even tweeted out, I never knew there were so many awesome feminists in our restored church.
Male and female.
Yeah, and I thought for a second I was going to put the word female in there, but I thought, no. So walk us through kind of that. You talked about you're a feminist, and there's women in my life that take on that label, and there's women that aren't comfortable taking on that label, and I sort of honor both.
Absolutely.
But help people that are new to that word, or even people of my generation that have kind of grown up with that's not a good thing to be, and that wouldn't be consistent with Christ.
Right.
Why that seems consistent with Christ and what he would teach.
Yeah, sometimes I want to write a book called like Feminism, Jesus Made Me Do It, because I really feel like I identify as a feminist and I feel empowered by that because of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because of the gospel of Jesus Christ, I know that I am equal to all my male counterparts. I know that there is no more value in a male version of Rosie than a female version of Rosie.
Wow.
I know that I have just as important responsibilities, and I'm just as capable as a leader and as a teacher as my male counterparts. And
Do you need the priesthood to do that?
Well, I guess it gets into a conversation of, do I have the priesthood? Am I ordained? No. Do I feel as a endowed member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints capable to, and that I have in elements authority to use the priesthood? Absolutely. Elder Oaks talks about in his great talk from General Conference, I can't remember the title of it.
I can't
think
either.
It's like Keys and Authority of the Priesthood. But he says, like, when women serve within their callings and when they serve missions, they're serving with power and authority of the priesthood. Because what other power would they be using?
Yeah, I remember that.
I love that. And I remember elders when I was a sister missionary saying, well, this is a priesthood responsibility. And I wish I could go back and say, yeah, it is. And that's why I'm here. Because I've been called to this mission and I've been called to this work. And I'm using God's power and authority to do his work. It's a priesthood responsibility, and here I am lining up for duty. And so I think if I had a child that was sick, and for whatever reason there wasn't a priesthood holder in the home, would I lay my hands on that child's head? No, but I would feel totally capable and able to call down the blessings of heaven as I would hold that child in my arms.
That's beautiful.
I just can't believe that Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother would keep those blessings, their power from their righteous children just because one's a female versus being a male. So,
as I listen to you, I just feel a wonderful spirit. I don't feel a spirit of like activism or marching or some of the words that perhaps I'd associated with feminism in my earlier days. I feel a spirit of wanting to help everybody come unto Christ and use this beautiful person that I am to bless other people's lives. And it's interesting what you said, men can be feminists too. I've never really thought of that. I guess that's
absolutely.
true.
I think anyone that believes that women and men are equal and deserve equal treatment, I just think...
Well, I guess I'm taking on
you're
the
a feminist.
label. I should answer my tweet.
Yeah, and I know that I do know that there have been some negative connotations with that word, so some people just don't like to use it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But the doctrine that men and women are equal is so foundational to the doctrine of Jesus Christ. And so I think if we really think about it, most Mormons would identify with that. And in the Young Women's theme, we say we will stand, we will stand as... I can't even think of the theme now.
I can't either.
It just says we will stand for truth and righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reminded of the title of Liberty, that I think like they were marching and they had their feelings and their title put on signs essentially. And so I do see myself as I'm going to, in some cases, be loud about this. And if I need to march, I'll march. And if I need to feel like an activist, I will. And I know that's not for everyone. But I'm a big believer in like divide and conquer.
That's great.
If you are going to try, we all have different ways of sharing a very similar message. And this is just how I share my version of it.
That's beautiful. And you have my complete support. And I think you're helping people come unto Christ by your own example, but also creating vision for how we can use everybody's talents for the great cause. And how perhaps in the past, and I'm certainly guilty of this, haven't fully seen women in my life the way our Heavenly Parents see women, and have marshaled their resources, so to speak, for the cause, and let their true colors shine and their true abilities shine. And I think some women in our church feel just fine. There's no angst with anything that's happened, and I think we're both giving them permission to feel that way. But for others, they feel different, and they feel their voices and their value could be better used for the cause. And so I think you're a great example in that own life, but you're also helping other people to better understand.
Yeah, I just think we're all on the same team, right? Men and women, and like, why would we not want more teammates fighting on our side? You know, why would we could double the amount of soldiers. Like, why would we not want that?
And I love that God created us all different. He doesn't want a monolithic, homogeneous, group. He wants, I think if we're going to take the gospel to the whole world, he wants us to take it the way we all individually see and relate. And you're going to reach people, Rosie, that I can't reach. And if we're going to bring people into the fold and invite people to come unto Christ, I think we do it with our authentic selves versus some correlated script. Now, missionaries need to kind of look the same. Like, we're all still wearing white shirts.
Yeah.
So there is some sort of, that going on.
Yeah.
But I think our individual skills, talents, and abilities, instead of being blended into one, one set of talents, we need to, look at everybody's beautiful distances. I love Elder Holland's choir analogy because everybody's needed in the choir. It's not like some voices are less valued. Chapter 5, Rosie, is the temple is important, but it's not because of the tulips. Now, that's an interesting title. Tell us about that one.
Young women, I know young men, but I think more so young women are taught that their bodies are temples. And some were often taught that so you would never do anything. Obviously, the temple's very beautiful, and the lesson is kind of focused on the looks and the appearance of the temple. And I just think it's off. Obviously, we know temples they don't matter because they're beautiful. We beautify them out of respect of what's on the inside. And so if our bodies are like temples, they don't matter because they're beautiful. They matter because of what's on the inside. They house spirit daughters of God, spirit sons of God. And we clearly need to be respectful of those bodies, and we do all that we can to care for them, just like the church spends a lot of money to groom Temple Square. But if something terrible happened and acid rain burned down on the Salt Lake Temple and it suddenly turned black and the tulips were all gone, it would be no less sacred. And I think it's important to remember that the temple is always under revisions and that we are always updating it and cleaning it and sometimes tearing down parts and rebuilding, and that the same applies for us, that we are always under construction in some ways, and that's okay. It's kind of part of the deal.
I know, I really like what you're saying, and I know when I served as a YSA bishop and working through people that have been sexually active before marriage, it was kind of, we could kind of work through the repentance process and get people clean, but often they felt forever different and forever changed and forever, just different. I used to call it pink Mormon thinking, or they could never quite see themselves the way they were before, they became sexually active. Any thoughts on those lines as you're talking?
Well, I think in some ways we feel different because we are different now. We've had experiences, we've learned lessons that the version of you before that experience didn't understand. And so you are different. But it doesn't, I don't think it has to be seen as a negative way.
Yeah.
In a negative way that like you'll never get back to that version of you. As far as I understand, we're not trying to get back to any former version of ourselves. We're trying to move forward. And so we will always be changing and we will always be different. I think it's kind of the purpose. And that we don't have to see change as such a negative thing. That I'm grateful that the atonement doesn't wipe our memories of experiences. Like I mentioned earlier, there are things that I've experienced in my life, and I think it's probably true for everyone, that in some ways you wish you could take back, but I wouldn't, because it's made me who I am today, and it's helped me, I think, to be a more compassionate person. I can better practice empathy because I've had those experiences. I feel like I'm better capable at relating to someone because I can say like, oh, I don't totally know what you're going through, but I've kind of been there. And I feel like it makes me a more useful tool in God's hands rather than a version of me that like can only do one thing, because I've never kind of had more complicated experiences.
I get tenderhearted again, Rosie, because everything you just taught is not only, I believe, is consistent with the gospel of Jesus Christ, but there's no shame. When you said something really powerful to me that no one's ever said. You said we're not supposed to go back to our prior selves. That isn't the goal of repentance. Our goal of repentance is to move forward. We're different if we've messed up, but we're not meant to go back to our prior selves. We're supposed to move forward with who we are and our experiences and use that in a positive way versus in a change for the negative way.
Right.
And I think shame, as we both know, is this idea that I am bad versus I did something bad.
Right.
And you're very good, and I didn't have a lot of skill at that at first, being a YSA bishop, was how to sort of take shame out of any of this. And I don't think anywhere in the scriptures there's examples of Jesus Christ shaming anybody.
No, never.
And so I think that's just a helpful education. And what you just said is just so powerful and so full of hope. It doesn't take sin away. It doesn't take the need for the atonement away. But it has no shame, and it's full of hope. And it's wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
The next chapter in Rosie's book, the subchapter is Q Nor. Tell us about that.
So Q Nor, this chapter is just the story of how I started my company, kind of to go in hand of me encouraging especially women to create new things. This is kind of a case study in how I've done that. I am single, and so I don't have the opportunity right now to create little humans, which is, a very common understanding of a woman's purpose within this church. But I still very much can be a creator, and that can be just as fulfilling and just as fundamental in my development to become more like Christ, as my peers who are creating people. So I just say I'm not creating people. I'm just creating businesses.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Anything else you want to share about this chapter called Q Nor?
No, that's all right.
All right. Thank you, Rosie. The next chapter is called Following the Tapping.
Yes. So the Following the Tapping comes from a book that I read when I was in about 8th grade that I really loved. And it's the story of this tribal man in Africa who is on a journey to find his homeland, a place of, like a sacred place for his people. And he talks about how he's following simply a tapping in his heart. And that really stuck out to me when I was just a little 8th grader, and it has been a pretty consistent theme in my life that I've taken steps that I've never seen someone take before, but I felt a tapping in my heart, and I felt like this is the right path for me. That doesn't mean that it's always going to work out, and that I don't always understand the reasoning behind it, but it's helped me to be confident in walking paths that aren't commonly walked.
I love that, and I love some of you've talked about Richard Rohr in here, a Catholic
Oh my gosh,
priest.
I love Richard Rohr. And you sound just like Richard Rohr. Did you
Well,
know that?
thank
Have
you.
people told you that before?
No, but I'll take that as a
You
compliment, Rosie.
do.
Tell us about why some of your feelings about Richard Rohr and what he's teaching that are helpful for us Mormons.
I love a lot of what Richard Rohr does, but specifically in this chapter, I talk about his idea of falling upward, and that often in religious history and religious stories, large amounts of growth only come after some sort of fall. And we know that with Adam and Eve. And he goes through and he lists, even Christ had to fall. He had to die before he could be resurrected and complete the atonement. That at some points in our lives, there have to be failures. There has to be falls in some way so that we can move forward. And he has a great line that I can't quote right off the top of my head, but he essentially says, it's by pushing left and right that an ice skater is able to move forward. And I think that is such an important thing for us all to keep in our minds, that by kind of moving side to side and sometimes going too far in one direction is actually how we move in the direction we're supposed to. And that though we often hear that the path is narrow and straight, that the atonement is a really beautiful safety net, and that you can always get put back on that path and get redirected towards Christ, and that you don't have to take perfect steps in order to really progress.
There's nothing but hope in that, and it's so consistent with our doctrine. I love that. I do love the idea of falling upward.
I
love these paradoxes, Rosie, like that one, that you would think falling being negative, but it's part of potentially growing and stretching. And I've certainly grown and stretched in my YSA assignment as I've just become more familiar with some of the complicated issues, and it's helped me be a better person. Are there any other things you'd like to share about the book, Rosie, for our listeners?
I mean, I think the main thing that I want to share is sometimes I think people look at the title and sometimes I feel this way, like, oh, Model Mormon, what a lame title. But the purpose behind the title is to help people see that if you need to be your own model Mormon, and that we can really define that however we want in whatever way that we want. And that what really matters is not how much of a model of a Mormon you are, but what kind of disciple of Christ you are. And there's room for a lot of different types of disciples because there's a lot of different people that need to be reached, like you were saying earlier.
Do you find, because of your social media presence and this tone that you're sharing, that people reach out to you and open up to you about different complicated issues?
Yeah. I mean, I get a lot of emails and a lot of DMs from people that just say, hey, I just learned about Brigham Young and blacks in the priesthood and the temple ban, or I just am learning about things about Joseph Smith and polygamy, or I'm just starting to feel kind of smothered as a woman, or just lots of different things. And they come to me, and sometimes it's overwhelming because I just feel like, I don't know, like I'm not the source of all knowledge. But I am grateful that they can come to me so that I can say, like, yeah, I hear ya. And like, yeah, that's a hard one to wrap your head around. But you can still, like, I know we're taught to not be cafeteria Mormons. We've heard that a lot. But I think, like, if that's what you have to offer, pass on the peas, get the pudding, and come sit at the Savior's table. Like, he is not going to, like, shun you or send you away because you weren't able to fill your whole tray. With time, will he probably try to get you to try the peas? Yeah. But he's fine with you sitting and enjoying the pudding if that's all you can take in right now. So yeah, I do have a lot of people reach out to me, and it does, it feels like a really sacred responsibility and a privilege. I also have a lot of people who get upset at what I do or the way I do it. And I'm reminded of a big picture that a friend has above her fireplace, and it just says, "I'm not for everyone." And so I try to remind myself of that I'm not for everyone. The way I'm Mormon is not for everyone, but I know that there are people that need a friend like me, and I'm willing to be their friend. I may not be the friend for everyone, but they need this, and so I want to fill that need. That's how I can play a role.
Oh, there's so many good things in that we really can't. I love what you said, that I can't meet everybody's needs.
Right. No one's a perfect example.
Yeah, but I love how you work with people that reach out to you, that you validate how they feel and you honor how they feel, and it's not a fix-it mentality, and you can hold their pain and listen and honor them. And I think it's interesting that because of what you're talking about, that then people reach out to you. You're safe. And I think that's a good thing for all of us that are in local leadership assignments, that I think at the end of the day, we kneel down and pray and say, I want anybody that I have stewardship responsibility to feel safe opening up to me. But sometimes it's hard to know how to do that. And I think if you're showing a great deal of love and kindness, not only to the easy people to love, but the harder people to love in theory.
Right.
I love Brene Brown's quote, it's hard to hate people up close, so move in. So if we start to love our LGBTQ brothers and sisters that are stepped away or not stepped away, if we're honoring them and showing and seeing good in their lives, and in all these different examples you've shared with us, then we become what you have become, which is safe. And then people feel safe opening up. I certainly found that as a Singles Ward Bishop when I started to, on social media, post some kind things about LGBTQ. As I've shared in other podcasts, I didn't realize the safety that created for 98% of my, or 95% of my ward was probably straight.
Right.
But a lot of straight people need to talk about really complicated things.
Right.
And because of that, they said, well, he's safe now.
Right. And I think that there's just an element of knowing that I can go to this person and they're not going to try to tell me what I need to do to fix my problem. In the book, I write about an experience I had with Elder Bednar, where he asked for some feedback on a talk that he gave, that I was there during a practice, and I said, oh, there was this part that I didn't really understand. And I tried.
So let me just get this straight. You're giving feedback to Elder Bednar.
Right. And
this is a beautiful situation.
Well, I mean, I think it's a testament to Elder Bednar that he does practice for his speeches, and he often asks.
That's beautiful.
Not the men in suits around him, but he asks the camera individuals, the people setting up lights, the caterers. He just asks.
And I bet he's
people.
grateful for honest feedback.
Yeah.
So keep telling this story.
And your reaction was kind of the reaction that all of the men around him were looking at me like, who do you think you are? But I just thought, I'm not going to lie to an apostle. So he said, I didn't really understand how these 2 points connect. He stepped away for a moment and continued a conversation, and then he came back to me, and he didn't tell me what to do to fix it, or like what I didn't understand. He basically just said, well, you should study that, which I think is so classic Elder Bednar, that he would encourage an individual to connect to Heavenly Father. And I think we don't need. Was
that an okay answer for you?
It was. Okay. It was. And I think because I had studied it at
Did
that
you
point in my
feel validated to how you felt?
Yeah. It was more just I didn't understand how his introduction of his talk really connected to the majority of the talk, but I really appreciated that. And I also share a similar experience in the book with an interaction with President Nelson, that I approached him with a concern and something that was really weighing heavy on my heart, and he didn't fix it for me. He basically just turned me back to God. And I think that's an example that we all can follow, that if Elder Bednar and President Nelson
that's beautiful.
Don't feel like they're in the business of fixing people's problems and telling them what they should do or should understand, then we probably shouldn't be either. And that sometimes we just need to be there to say, yeah, like, that's hard. I don't understand that either. But I bet if you kept trying to connect to your Father and Mother in heaven, that at some point you'll figure that out.
I love that, Rosie. Let's close this podcast, but let's imagine right now that there are people, and this would generally be younger, because more younger people are in this boat, that are struggling to stay in. They actually want to stay in. They're not doing anything wrong. They're just want to find a way to stay in, but are coming across difficult things. What general advice would you give to those that are in that category?
I first and foremost would say, like, I feel you. Like, there are a lot of things, and there have been a lot of times in my life where I felt like this is really hard for me to be in this church. And I love the gospel. And the church as an institution has really blessed my life. But there are still things that make it really hard for me. And so I would just say, like, you are not alone. And I would just say, like, just find something that you can hold on to. Just find one tiny element that you can hold on to. And even if it's like a fragment of rope that for a while you're swimming on the side of the boat and you're not in the boat anymore, but you kind of are tethered in some tiny way, awesome. Whatever that may be, but just know, regardless, that you are loved. I close every Young Women's Fireside I do, letting girls know that I speak to the girls that will no longer identify as Mormons within the next 10 years. And I just say, no matter where you are, you're loved. And it's not because you're a good Mormon. It's not because you're a bad Mormon. It's not because you're this or that. It's just simply because you're theirs. And that they will always be working to help you feel of their love and to return to them. Whatever that path looks like, the end goal is that they're working to get you home. And just trust that they can do that.
I love your speaking to young men, young women, and I hope young men too, because you're going to help both grow. If you were at a YSA bishop training meeting and they were like me, wanted to really understand how we could do better, what advice would you give to, this doesn't need to be YSA bishops, could be Relief Society president, young women's president. Often young women's and young men's presidents perhaps become the first people someone will confide in, maybe a bishop, but it often is that young woman's leader, young men's leader that aren't necessarily sort of ramped up to sort of, oh my gosh, someone just told me something in confidence that's, I want to be helpful here. What general advice would you give that group?
That your job is to love. That it's okay if you are caught off guard by someone that comes and confides in you and you don't know what to say. That's okay. And you don't feel prepared. That's okay. Just always be prepared to respond with love. And then as you pray and study with love in your heart, you might gain greater understanding of how specifically you can help that individual. But like the first response is always that you love them and that God loves them. And there are like zero qualifiers attached to that.
That's great. Any concluding thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners, Rosie?
Oh, I'm just very grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosie, for joining us. It's women like you that are the future of our church, future of our world. It gives me hope. I very much believe that your generation is a stronger generation. Yeah, you may be on your phones more, but the general criticisms that I sometimes hear are not correct. And I just have great faith in the future when I get to meet people like you and other YSAs that are wired the way Christ, I think, wants you to be wired and are lifting and helping so many. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.